Be prepared. Because when the sun enters Gemini, the world gets louder, but your soul gets softer. And if you don't make space for that softness, you'll mistake the noise for truth. You might already feel it, an invisible current pulling at your thoughts, scattering your focus, rushing your spirit into decisions that don't feel fully yours. That's not just distraction, that's energetic interference. And what's coming tomorrow will amplify it. This isn't the kind of shift you move through surrounded by people, opinions, and screens. This is the kind of shift that requires silence. Not because you're hiding, but because your field is being tuned, and it can't tune while it's absorbing everything around it. Gemini energy moves fast. It thinks fast. It transmits fast. And if you're not centered, it'll carry you into someone else's signal before you even realize you've left your own. This is why the chosen must pull back now, because the wisdom coming in, the next instruction, the next vision, the next direction won't arrive through conversation. It will arrive in stillness, in isolation, in the quiet moment where your frequency finally becomes louder than the world. Stay with me, because in just a moment I'll show you why this week's shift is a portal disguised as overstimulation, in how to anchor yourself before it overwhelms your system. It might feel like you're pulling away, ignoring people, not responding like you used to, not showing up where you said you would. It might feel like you're disappearing from the version of your life that others expect you to keep performing. But what if you're not vanishing? What if you're just becoming too vibrationally sensitive to pretend anymore? Because what's happening now is not emotional withdrawal, it's spiritual recalibration. And the only way to receive the real message of this Gemini portal is by stepping back, fully, intentionally, unapologetically, into isolation. Gemini season is the opening of the air element, the intellect, the voice, the messenger. But before it delivers truth, it drowns you in signals, thoughts, distractions, cravings, people talking, algorithms flooding your nervous system. And for the chosen ones, that kind of mental weather can feel like energetic static. Have you felt it? That sense that your thoughts aren't even yours anymore? That the voice inside your head is getting harder to hear? That you're in a room full of people and still feel completely somewhere else? That's the shift. And your system knows it can't integrate this energy while still immersed in stimulation. So it starts to retreat naturally. You cancel plans. You forget to reply. You crave sleep. You want silence more than conversation. You feel guilty about it, maybe. But somewhere deeper, you know it's not about avoidance. It's about alignment. Because something is trying to land in you. And if you're constantly adapting to the energies around you, there's no clean channel for it to come through. Gemini wants to activate your voice, yes. But first, it has to reconnect your signal. And that signal isn't found in your to-do list or in trying to keep up with the chaos of the world. It's found in solitude, in stillness, in that breath you take when you realize you're tired of performing clarity and ready to actually hear what your soul is saying. This moment isn't asking you to be social. It's asking you to retreat into spiritual sanctuary, to build a container around your energy that lets you filter what enters, what stays, and what no longer belongs. Because in this phase, without that filter, you'll find yourself mimicking others' thoughts, desires, even moods, without realizing it. And the most dangerous part? you'll start calling that mimicry your intuition. That's why the isolation is sacred. You're not meant to be accessible right now. You're not meant to be emotionally available for everyone's process. You're not meant to be the receiver of every frequency floating in the collective. Because the insight coming in for you now requires space to echo. And the truth is, most people won't understand this. They'll take your silence personally. They'll feel abandoned. They'll say you're different. But they won't realize that what's really happening is that you're becoming undefinable by who you used to be. This is not disappearance. It's emergence. But emergence has a prelude, and that prelude is stillness. So, if you've been craving solitude, honor it. If you've been tempted to cancel, cancel. If you've been ghosting the world a little bit lately, don't force your return. Your soul is creating a buffer between your past signal and your future frequency. And if you cross that line too soon, you'll dilute the transmission that was meant only for you. You are not shutting down. You are powering down the noise so the truth can power up. You felt it, haven't you? That subtle buzzing behind your thoughts. The way your mind has been racing lately, not towards something meaningful, but in loops. Ideas multiplying, conversations replaying. A sense that you should be making progress, saying something, planning something, fixing something. But instead, you just feel scattered, like your bandwidth has been hijacked by a signal that's everywhere and nowhere all at once. That's not you. That's Gemini energy arriving. When the sun crosses into Gemini, the airwaves open, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And for the chosen ones, the ones who carry naturally sensitive fields, it doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with noise. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, the messenger. But what most forget is that messengers don't just deliver wisdom. They carry everything, every thought, every emotion, every conversation in the collective field. And when the sun amplifies that channel, it doesn't gently offer you new truth. It throws the whole inbox at you. That's why your thoughts feel layered. That's why your decisions feel delayed. That's why your voice feels distant, like it's trying to find the frequency through fog. It's not that you've lost clarity. It's that clarity is waiting for you to filter the static first. This kind of overload doesn't feel chaotic at first. It feels like mental urgency, like something you should be doing, somewhere you should be heading, something you're late for, even if nothing's changed. But urgency isn't truth. It's vibration without direction. And right now, that vibration is moving too fast for most to hold. So what happens? You try to push through. You open more tabs. You multitask. You start 10 things and finish none. You speak when you're not anchored. You agree to things that don't align. And by the end of the day, you don't even know who you were trying to be anymore. That's Gemini overload, not insight, not clarity, just motion for the sake of motion. And that's the trap, because the mind loves movement. But the soul doesn't need motion, it needs meaning. And meaning doesn't survive in a field that's constantly absorbing everyone else's frequency. This is why you may be waking up tired, even after a full night of sleep. Why certain conversations leave you drained. Why old fears or desires are surfacing without invitation. Because the solar light is scanning your field for everything unprocessed, and suddenly, all of it's active. Not to punish you, but to give you one sacred choice. Will you filter, or will you follow the noise? Because if you don't pause and truly pause, you'll find yourself living someone else's thoughts. Your goals won't be yours. Your reactions will echo the collective. Your emotions will reflect every room you walk into. And the worst part? You'll call that intuition. But it's not. It's interference. So the mental overload isn't a mistake. It's a warning. To slow down, to notice, to ask, is this even mine? Because clarity isn't gone. It's just buried. Beneath the notifications, the looping thoughts, the distractions that feel urgent but aren't aligned. And until you find stillness, not silence around you, but silence within you, that clarity will stay hidden. Not because it's far, but because you haven't cleared the noise long enough to hear what's already waiting. There's a moment in every shift where clarity doesn't come from learning something new. It comes from finally unplugging from everything that isn't you. And if you've been chosen, you're already feeling it. It's not just fatigue. It's not just overstimulation. It's the quiet pressure of being too available to the wrong energies for too long. You feel it when you leave a conversation and suddenly question your path. You feel it when scrolling leaves you anxious instead of informed. You feel it when even your own thoughts start sounding like borrowed voices. This isn't confusion, this is contact overload. And the sun in Gemini doesn't tone it down, it turns it all the way up. Why? Because Gemini is the multi-channel frequency, and when solar light pours into that current, everything you've been connected to, consciously or not, begins to echo back at once. But here's what no one says. The more connected you are energetically, the more you're expected to filter. And most don't. They confuse empathy with obligation, sensitivity with openness, discernment with judgment. But you, as a chosen one, don't get to move through this energy passively. You don't get to absorb everything and pretend it's insight. Your field wasn't made to be a sponge. It was made to be a tuning fork, and tuning requires distance. You're not being called to isolate because you're weak. You're being called to isolate because the next transmission is coded for your frequency only. It won't land in group chats. It won't arrive mid-scroll. It won't find you when you're still halfway immersed in the emotional residue of others. The signal comes when you stop mimicking everyone else's vibration and remember your own. And yes, that might mean disappointing people. It might mean pulling away without explanation. It might mean sitting in a silence so loud it makes you question if you're doing something wrong. But you're not wrong. You're just finally tuning out the collective long enough to hear the sound of your next evolution. Because discernment isn't mental. It's vibrational memory. It's the deep knowing of what resonates before your mind has a chance to explain why. And right now, your clarity is hidden behind the noise of everything you haven't filtered yet. So how do you pull back? You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You just stop engaging with what doesn't feel alive in your field. You stop reacting to energy that doesn't match your truth. You stop speaking just to be heard. You listen, not outward, but inward. Because when the world gets loud, when Gemini scatters the message across frequencies, the chosen must withdraw. Not as an escape, not as avoidance, but as activation. Because that retreat is the only space where discernment sharpens. It's where you remember what your voice sounds like before the world taught you to modulate it. It's where you feel the frequency of yes and no in your body and start trusting it again. So if the invitation is appearing in missed calls, unread messages, delayed plans, accept it. That's not isolation. That's alignment making space. And once you honor that space, the signal clears, the confusion lifts, and you'll start to recognize which thoughts were never yours, just noise you forgot to mute. How to know what energy isn't yours. One of the most disorienting parts of spiritual sensitivity is not the volume of what you feel. It's how much of it isn't even yours. And yet, you carry it. You process it. You internalize it as if every emotion, every thought, every wave of tension came from inside you. But what if it didn't? What if the sadness isn't yours? What if the craving that hits you out of nowhere belongs to someone else's timeline? What if that sudden self-doubt, the one that whispered you're behind, was just a thread you picked up from the collective, not your soul? Under the current light of Gemini, the mental field is wide open. Thoughts move faster. Information transfers without filters. And if you don't recognize when your energy has been invaded, you'll begin to reshape yourself based on frequencies that were never meant to define you. So how do you know when an energy isn't yours? It starts in the nervous system. You enter a room feeling fine, and suddenly you're heavy. You wake up clear, but after scrolling for 5 minutes, your confidence vanishes. You spend an hour with someone who says nothing harsh, but you leave feeling emotionally bruised. That's not coincidence, that's absorption. It happens when you're too open, too tuned in, too available to the unspoken weight of others. And Gemini, as a mutable air sign, magnifies this transfer. Suddenly, you become a conduit for messages, moods, projections. And without boundaries, it's nearly impossible to sort out what originated from within you. So ask yourself, have you been over-explaining yourself lately? Have you said yes to things that felt off just to avoid dissonance? Have you looked in the mirror and not fully recognized the emotional state staring back? These are not personality shifts. They are vibrational invasions. And this week, with Gemini solar energy activating the collective field, you're being asked to pause and filter every emotion, every impulse, every reaction with a single sacred question. Is this mine? It may sound simple, but it's one of the most powerful practices you'll ever reclaim. Because when you begin to ask that, genuinely, not just as a mental concept, your field starts to close the doors that were left wide open for too long. And here's what happens next. The anxiety lessens. The internal dialogue softens. The confusion fades, not because anything changed, but because everything that wasn't yours begins to fall away. Your job right now isn't to figure everything out. It's to separate the true from the false, the self from the imprint, the resonance from the noise. And that requires stillness. It requires noticing. It requires the radical honesty of saying, this isn't mine to hold. Because when you start dropping what isn't yours, something miraculous happens. Your own truth gets louder, not because it suddenly appeared, but because you finally stopped drowning it out with the collective's chaos. So if you've been feeling like you've lost track of your center, if you're reacting in ways that surprise even you, if you're craving space without knowing why, that's the sign. You're not breaking, you're remembering. And every time you pull your energy back from where it never belonged, you step deeper into the clarity that was waiting for you all along. There's a version of you that's trying to emerge right now, but she's not loud. She doesn't push. She doesn't perform. She waits. Not for the world to make space, but for you to finally stop filling the space with noise. This is why solitude is calling you so strongly right now, not because you need to escape others, but because your next timeline isn't coded in company. It's coded in vibrational refinement, and that refinement happens alone. Gemini season is full of movement, voices, options, curiosity. But within that cloud of motion, there's also misdirection. Not every thought is a download. Not every conversation is a connection. Not every spark is a signal to act. And when you're sensitive, when your field is open, raw, ready, you become a magnet for input. But you weren't made to collect everything. You were made to filter, to choose, to protect the architecture of the self that's still forming. Because if you allow yourself to be shaped by every voice, every post, every vibration that enters your orbit, you end up building a version of you that wasn't chosen, just collected. And that version won't hold. So the solitude you feel drawn to, that deep instinct to cancel, to go inward, to do nothing, it's not depression, it's not failure. It's a cosmic filtration process. Your body knows, your field knows that something real is forming inside you, and it can't be exposed to premature opinion, projection, or pressure. This version of you is still fragile, still sacred, still unspoken. It doesn't want to be explained. It wants to be protected. Because if you speak her too soon, if you try to define her while you're still decoding the pieces, you risk reducing her to something smaller than what she came here to become. That's why this isolation feels heavier than usual. Because it's not just distance, it's guardianship. You are not hiding, you are shielding, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because some identities can only be born in silence. Some upgrades can only land in stillness. Some expansions can only be integrated when no one's watching, naming, expecting. And yes, it may feel strange, unnatural even, to not share, to not speak, to not explain. But this isn't the phase of external alignment. It's the phase of energetic precision. So let the solitude filter what your words can't. Let the silence show you what's yours without needing approval. Let the space cleanse you of everything that's trying to attach to a version of you that no longer exists. And when you finally feel the click, that internal resonance that says, "This is me," then, and only then, let the world in. Because by that point, the version of you that emerges won't need validation. She'll be undeniable. There's a strange thing that happens when a big shift is near. The world gets louder. Not just in volume, but in urgency. Suddenly, everyone has something to say. Everything feels important. Notifications spike, old connections resurface. The pull to be on, to respond, to explain, intensifies. But underneath it all, your soul knows it's time to get quiet. Because when the noise peaks, it usually means the signal is about to come through. And if you don't step back in time, you won't hear it. Not because it isn't speaking, but because your field is too full to receive. The sun entering Gemini opens portals of thought, word, exchange. But just before your clarity lands, you will feel the fog, the overstimulation, the scatter. Not because you're lost, but because you're passing through the final layer of what you're not. And that layer doesn't go quietly. The voices will get louder, the temptations will increase. You'll be offered chances to re-engage with the patterns you just healed from, to entertain distractions that wear the face of opportunity, to question whether you've gone too quiet for too long. But silence isn't weakness, it's signal refinement. Because your soul doesn't speak in noise, it speaks in echo, in vibration, in the stillness after the question, when the answer lands, not as words, but as knowing. This is that moment. You're not pulling away from life. You're moving out of distortion. You're not ignoring the world. You're anchoring in something the world can't define yet. And yes, it's going to feel strange. Like you're walking backward while everything else is speeding up. Like you're going slow on purpose while everyone else is rushing towards something undefined. But that stillness is sacred. That delay is intelligent. That quiet is where alignment gets coded. So if the world is getting loud around you, let it. If people are projecting their urgency onto you, let them. If you feel the pull to fix, to post, to reach, to prove, pause. Because what's about to arrive doesn't need a microphone. It needs a clear channel. And that channel is you. Let this be your frequency now. Still, unmoved, listening not to the world, but to what is trying to rise in the space the world cannot touch. You are not missing the shift. You are the shift. But only if you can stay quiet long enough to let it crystallize in your field.